Warning: this review reveals content that may be disturbing to some. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hey YouTube, what's up? This is Reviewer 97. Again, I'm sorry about not making as many videos as I was, but I'm back up and running again. So, today I want to talk about a film that is very popular among generations to this day, but a lot of people don't know of any of the other adaptations before it. So this is a different adaptation. It's not the most popular, it is not the best, but it's a good adaptation. So, this is Phantom of the Opera. And no, this is not the 2004 musical with Gerard Butler and Emmy Rossum and Patrick Wilson. And it is not the 1925 silent picture with Lon Chaney and Mary Philbin. This is the 1989 horror adaptation with Robert Englund. This is a film that not many people know about, and this is a film that did not do very well at the box office. But it is a film that is on the good borderline, but not the very good or best borderline. It's a B movie. It was released in 1989. It stars Robert Englund, who was most famous for playing Freddy Krueger in Nightmare on Elm Street. This is more of a slasher version of the film. It is not a musical. It is not a love story, really. It is more of a tale of horror and gore. Without further ado, let's get into the film. The plot's very different from the original story in Gaston Leroux's novel, and also in many of the other versions, which are set in Paris, France. This one is set in two locations, believe it or not. One is modern-day New York in 1989, and the second location is the 1800s Victorian-era London, England. So they are very far off from even getting near, let's say, the book. In this version, there's this young girl named Christine, and she is an opera singer in New York, and she wants to try out for this production, and she sings a piece from Don Juan Triumphant, written by this character named Eric Dessler, who is played by Robert Englund. So the plot pretty much just goes on. She starts singing the part, and then all of a sudden she gets hit by a sandbag and time travels back to the Victorian era London, into what's called the London Opera House now, instead of the Paris Opera House, which is, you know, the Opera Populaire. Instead of being that, now it's the London Opera House, a totally different place. And she's an understudy to the diva, and she plays the diva, which is Carlotta, and a lot of the you know, just the she's an understudy. Don't know how to other ways to put it. I was trying to find another way to put it, but yeah. And underneath the opera house is this man named Eric Dessler, who is a disfigured man who lost his beauty after he made after he sold his soul to the devil, asking him to help the world to love his music. He says, "I'd give anything for the world to love my music," and he went a little too far and sold his soul. And he said, "That's all it will love you for." So that means everyone will love his music, which they do, but they will never love him for who he is. So he disfigures his face, and now Eric is a disfigured man, and he lives underneath the opera house, and he's trying to pretty much win the love of Christine, who time traveled back to that era. And I guess it's supposed to be like some kind of nightmare, maybe like real possibility. Maybe she's also lived, who knows. It's like a whole I don't know how to put it, but it's very different than these other ones. This was the 1980s. This was at the end of the slasher era, and it's a film that I think went a little too far, but it's alright. I only have a few thoughts on this film. One is that in the 1980s, the slasher era was dying out, and not many people really cared about it. They were, going for other things. And this is, the musical just released a few years before, 1986, I believe it was released. And so what they did is I guess they want to attract the younger fans of, like, you know, the young fans of, like, you know, Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, movies like that. So they went for a whole different look at Phantom of the Opera after the musical was the big success, Andrew Lloyd Webber's musical. So they decided to make this version, and they decided to put Robert Englund as the Phantom. Now, Robert Englund does not do a bad job as the Phantom. Robert Englund, he's creepy, he's too, but the thing I don't like is he's too much of a Freddy Krueger kind of character, you know? He's a nightmare character who kind of, you know, is just sly, and he's, you know, really sneaky, and he's scary, and he's just too much of that Freddy Krueger. Even if you look at the original poster for this movie, the original poster makes them look out to be like a Freddy Krueger character, and they even spoil the whole point of watching this film. The thing is that, you know, the Phantom's disfigured, yes, but you don't know what it looks like. You want to find out later on. So why not leave that mask on until it's time to show? But no, they have to show part of his disfigurement. So they totally screwed it over, even with the poster. But like I said, Robert Englund's not bad. He has some great lines in this film, one of which is my favorite, is he's talking to Joseph, and he tells him, and Joseph Bouquet, I'm guessing, they just call him Joseph. He's a stagehand, and he's lowering the scene, and he blames the sandbag falling on Christine on the Phantom. And then he tells him, I won't let this happen again. And he says, no, it won't. You're suspended. And he kicks him off of the platform that he's on above the stage, and he has a rope tied around his foot, and he's dangling at the bottom, and then it just goes south from there. But yeah, other than that, it's not bad, but it's not good. Like I've said before, this movie is a slasher flick of Phantom of the Opera. This is not a musical. This is far from musical. Look at the poster. Does that look like a musical to you? That is definitely not a musical. Yes, this film is rated R. There is a version of the DVD I actually did find on Google Images. I don't know if this was photoshopped or if this was something that really happened, but there's a DVD cover that actually says that the film is rated PG. Okay, now that is way too, I wouldn't say surprising, but it's something that's definitely not PG rated. Even by today's standards, that film is not PG rated. Parents, I would not let your kids watch this version at all. And I'm going to give you the reasons why right now. Things are about to get TVMA kind of right here. The Phantom does not wear the traditional plastic mask that you see him on the cover of the musical. He doesn't wear the half mask. He doesn't wear a full mask. He doesn't wear anything. This Phantom actually is creative but gross. He skins his victims and stitches their flesh to his face to make a real face for himself. Now again, they're trying to add to the gore, and they're trying to make it, you know, gross, and they're trying to, you know, appeal to the slasher fans. But still, just the thought of that is pretty disturbing. Also, there are scenes where the Phantom is shown, you know, killing people. There's one scene where a man, they don't ever show the man being skinned, like they don't show him taking the knife and cutting the skin off. They do show an instance of where he is skinned, like the aftermath of him, and he's like barely alive, and he's crying for help. Well, not crying, but he's like gasping for help, and then he falls down, and he's shown, you know, in blood red. I'm sure they just painted him red for the scene. But yeah. And then you got, you know, there's a few other scenes. There's a scene where 3 burglars try to rob the Phantom, and he ends up killing them in very interesting ways. One he stabs, another one I think he beheads him. And then there's one scene I actually do kind of like that's from this film, I'm not gonna lie. But it is a little bit more on the violent side, but it's just one of those scenes that you don't expect it to happen in every movie. You're just going, what just happened? There's a scene where he's in the sauna with the opera critic, and the opera critic wrote a bad review on Christine. Sorry if I'm giving too much away, but I will not give the ending away. So, yeah, he meets with the opera critic, and he's talking to him, you know, saying like, you know, I saw that you wrote Christine a bad, no, what was the line? Oh, I found your account of Miss Day's performance somewhat troubling. Could we be that we saw different shows? And he goes, he's being sarcastic, the opera critic, and he's like, Miss Day, I was sorry for her, embarrassed. This was beyond her. And then he says, you know, maybe you should have a better seat, like, you know, like perhaps you weren't afforded a seat befitting your taste and your knowledge of the arts. And he tells him, if you reconsider, I could provide you with a private box, obviously probably the Phantom's box. And then he says, in all truthfulness, I think I'd rather die than to subject myself back to that shrieking child for another evening. This angers Eric. the Phantom, and he says, "As you wish." And he actually uses his towel, throws it around his face, and squeezes with just pulling on the towel, breaking his face pretty much. And then he throws him against the wall, and that's pretty much the scene. And it's just really interesting to see that he actually made use of his towel in that scene. It's like, you don't have your knife, you don't have anything. How are you gonna do this? But I guess you better be careful if you're with Eric, because he can kill you with pretty much anything. I mean, if he can kill you with a towel, he can probably kill you with just something, anything. But yeah, anyways, this is just a film that is definitely not for kids. It's a film that's far from being the best, but it is definitely worth a watch if you're either a Phantom fan and you want to watch all the variations, or if you're just one of those people who likes the slasher gory flicks, then this is a good film to check out. But if you're just one of those who just likes a musical and you just want to watch other variations because of the musical, this is definitely not a movie for you, because this is not anywhere close to a musical. Although from what I've heard, it is a little bit closer to Gaston Leroux's novel, but really I don't see any connections. I mean, being in London, the skin mask, the time traveling, the 1980s New York, it just doesn't fit the novel. I know the scenes, I think, where the Phantom walks the London streets, I think that's a little bit incorporated in the book, that he actually goes out, you know, and is able to, you know, move through the shadows, and, you know, but other than that, you know, I mean, this version just doesn't do it for me. I have to give this one probably a 3.5 out of 5, just because Robert Englund was in it. It's good because he actually does do a pretty good performance as a British person, and then all that. And then I just leave off the other two because it's just too gory. There are other versions that are worse, such as the Argento version, which I have not checked out, and I don't think I want to. So I've heard that that's actually a worse version than this version, and if it is truly a worse version, I do not want to see it. Anyways, that's all. Check back in for another review. We will be starting our Halloween Oktoberfest on October 1st of this year, so be prepared for that. We will start our review series off with a movie from the 1920s under the same name as today's review. See you guys later.